Right. Hello again, this is Dolores Cannon with the Metaphysical Hour, and I have a very special guest tonight, but before we get to that, I want to give out our number. This is an international number where anyone can call in from anywhere in the world. The number is 877-876-5227. 877-876-5227. This number is toll-free all over the world. Although a lot of times when I do a show, no one calls in. They always say they're too busy listening anyway. Okay, but my guest tonight is PMH Atwater, and she is truly a legend and a wonderful person. And, well, hello, PMH.
Well, hi. I didn't know I was a legend, but that's okay.
All right. I wanted to say, you know, we go back many, many years.
Oh, I met you ages ago.
Well, I was just thinking about that. The very first time I ever met you was about 14, 15 years ago.
Oh, easy, maybe longer.
And I know it was at the Global Science with Dean
yes,
Stonier.
with Dean Stonier. Yeah, that does go back a ways, doesn't it?
Yeah, and that was the very first conference that I ever had to speak at. And you were already a legend by that time.
Oh, my goodness.
Because I remember I had you up on a pedestal, you know, I was just, you know, you were like an idol. And
oh, my goodness. Hon, I'm just a rascal. That's it.
The what?
I'm a rascal. That's it, you know.
But I remember, you know, you were just like an idol in my eyes, and here I was just
you're so
getting
sweet.
with my first conference, and I was scared to death. And you were so kind. You went out of your way to make me feel that I could do it, and you gave me inspiration.
Well, I knew you could. I just saw it in you.
But, you know, the first time to get up before an audience that big, and I was really scared, but I never forgot that you were so kind to me that day. And it really helped a lot, and, you know, it got me started anyway. But, you know, for you to take the time to do that to a beginner. Well, you know, we've come a long way since then, haven't we?
Sure. Hey, I live what I know to be true.
Okay, something else I want to say, too, before we get into it. A lot of people know and remember where they were on September the 11th, the day of the big event. And we know where we were, don't we?
Sure.
We were both at a conference the few days before in Asheville, I think it was, Asheville, North Carolina.
Right. And we were faced with getting out of town that night, and there was a big rainstorm coming, and I was just barely able to make it out on my airplane, on my plane, the flight. Because of all the heavy rain, they weren't sure they were going to lift off at all. But I did get home. I knew I had to get home. I did.
Yeah,
and the next morning, my oldest daughter called me on the telephone, and she said, "Mother, turn on the TV." So I turned on the TV, and there it was.
Well, that's what I remember. You got out, and I didn't.
Yeah, a lot of people were stuck because of that storm.
Well, I had another talk that next night when you were flying out. I had another talk.
Well, a lot of people didn't get out because of the storm.
Which was right next to Asheville. So I stayed overnight in these people's house. And the next morning we got up, we're getting packed and getting ready to go to the airport, and that's when they said, turn on the TV. So we were caught in it. We saw it all happening, and naturally we couldn't get out of there.
Yeah.
So we ended up having to drive all the way back. At least we had a rental car. So that's one thing. I saw you at the INES, you know, the New Age Trade Show in Orlando in February.
That's
and I reminded you, remember the last time we saw each other?
Right.
Yeah, a lot of people remember where they were on that day. So.
Well, sure.
Anyway, I've known PMH for a long time, and she has written many, many books. And they're on all kinds of subjects, but it's the same kind of subjects that I'm interested in.
Well, basically, it's the one theme, and that is near-death experiences.
Yeah.
And from that, I'm able to cover any and all kinds of anomalies and experiences and incidents and brain development and so forth and so on because of my research on the near-death experience.
Yeah, because,
Dolores, I was one of the original in the field. I began my work in 1978.
Well, you
my
were way
research
back
base
then.
is, my research
But
base...
I knew you were established before I came along.
Yeah, I'm one of the originals, and my research base is now considered to be either the largest or one of the largest. It's nearly 4,000 adult and child experiencers. I've written 7 books on my findings. People can find out all about that on my website. It's just my name.com, so it's www.pmhatwater.com.
Yeah.
And they can find out about my 7 books, the various charts, the various papers I've written, and so forth and so on, are also on my website. So I've been very active and very dedicated in that particular genre. What a lot of people don't realize is that in 1977, I died 3 times myself, and each time had a near-death experience, and each was different, although one seemed somehow to lead into the next one. And it was because of my 3rd near-death experience that I became a researcher.
That's what I was wondering. That started you off, didn't it, then?
Well, it was very specific. I heard a voice speak, and I had been, for easily a decade before my experience, I had been a teacher of meditation and explorer of altered states of consciousness and so forth and so on. So I was familiar with angel voices and guides and guardians and, all these kinds of spiritual voices that one can hear on the other side or when you're in an altered state. And this voice wasn't like that.
It was
not like any of those voices. It was sort of like every molecule in every cell in the universe just sort of got up and saluted this voice. It was just so awesome. And I considered it to be of God. And the voice, when it spoke, it was very specific. And I'll quote you because it's very short. What it said was, test revelation. You are to do the research. 1 book for each death. End of quote. I was shown what that meant. Books 2 and 3 were named, not book 1. And I was not told how long it would take me, how I could do this. But I accepted the mission, and that's why I'm alive. I mean, I'm alive to do that work. That's why I came back. And I'm a cop's kid. I was raised in a police station, so I use police investigative techniques as my protocol. Some people say, well, I'm using a self-styled method, or I made it up. Anybody who knows anything about police science, when they study my protocol, know that I stick with that protocol exactly.
But you mean it's more like a scientific approach, you mean, or what?
Absolutely. It's scientific, but yet it's a little bit broader than what... Well, it's not like a double-blind study with a control group.
Yeah.
Rather, what you're doing is you're having sessions with people. You're not just interviewing them. You're studying them. You're studying the eyes. You're studying the body. You're studying the body language. You are studying all kinds of things about the individual. Your questions are always wide open. In other words, well, the way Dad raised me, he was so disturbed by people who were witness to an accident, for instance.
Yeah.
Let's say there were 4 people that were witness to an accident, and each one would have a different story.
Yeah,
and it just drove him nuts. So he was very insistent that I learn how to be an observer. And that when you're an observer, if you ask questions of anybody, all you can say is, like for instance in the accident, what happened to you? or what did you see, or what did you witness? That's all you can say. You can't say car until they say car. You can't say crash until they say crash.
Yeah.
You cannot bias your interview in any way. So all I would do when I was interviewing these people would simply say, what happened to you?
Uh-huh.
And the magic word was always, and? Oh, tell me more. And you use a lot of body language. You use a lot of facial expressions. When you are having sessions with kids, you know enough with a child that you're never above eye level. Never, never, never. That's a no-no. If you do that, they don't trust you.
Oh, okay.
So you always get down to eye level. So if you're interviewing toddlers or, kids that are just recently verbal or kids that aren't very tall, you're on the floor with them.
But is it more difficult, though, to get information from younger kids, though?
No, not at all. Once you know how to do it, and I tell people that in detail in my book, The New Children and Near-Death Experiences. In the back in one of the appendices, I go in depth about the protocol I use. So it takes about 10 minutes, maybe 15, to gain a child's trust, and then they just open up and wow.
That's what they usually say. Children are more truthful anyway.
Oh, it just comes out lickety-split.
They don't have the experience to be influenced that way either.
Well, the younger ones certainly. So I've done certainly a lot of work in this area. But one of the things that interested you that I was working on way back when, and finally wrote a book about it, was the future memory phenomenon.
Okay, but let me ask you, did you ever have any contact with Elizabeth Kubler-Ross?
Oh, yeah. She's the one who got me started.
Because
in the sense
she was involved with the near-death experience way back.
I met her in Chicago at the O'Hare Airport in July of 1978. Remember, I began my work in November of 78. I met her in July, and I think it was July. Yeah, it was either July or August, but I think it was in July.
Yeah.
And her plane was late for a trip to Europe. It was over an hour late. And I recognized her, went up to her, and asked if we could just visit. And we could. We did. We sat on a bench, just the two of us. We talked like a couple of little kids who'd known each other forever.
Whenever I met her, she was very approachable.
Yeah. And I told her about my own experiences, all three of them.
Yeah.
She listened. And she was the one who told me that I was a near-death experiencer.
Yeah.
She told me what the near-death experience was. She never mentioned Raymond Moody. She never mentioned his book.
Yeah.
And I knew nothing about